Hello everyone, this is the KMN 1971, back with my weekly comic book haul. I didn't have anything from this week's comic book stack that would be, I guess, under anyone's radar, just the usual stuff. So I will just jump right back into the back issue portion of the weekly comic book haul. So as I've said before, one of my comic book shops kind of revamped their dollar bins, and I was picking away at basically two things. One was the second volume of X-Force that features X-23, and the other thing would be, the other title rather, would be Doctor Strange from his first ongoing series. And this is a great little run that contains art from some of my favorite artists from the 1980s, 1970s. Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin on inks, followed by Paul Smith, and then Michael Golden, and then eventually Paul Smith again. So, fantastic stuff. I ended up discovering this run because Strange Blade ended up showing off a copy of issue number 49, which once I opened it up, that's when I realized who it was Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin on that particular issue. So I kind of started searching out this run, and I stumbled across it in a dollar bin, no less. So these books don't go for that much, but to pick them up for a dollar, hell yes. So issue number 48. I have issue number 49. I'm still on the lookout for issue number 50. Here's issue number 51. 52 with an outstanding Marshall Rogers Terry Austin cover. Number 53, where Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin, their art comes to an end. And this issue, number 54, was drawn by Paul Smith, and as well as someone else, I can't remember. But some nice stuff, nice deal for a buck a piece. The Wake, number 1. I have been a fan of Scott Snyder since American Vampire. Essentially, when I heard of Stephen King was going to be writing, along with some other writer that I'd never heard of before, a vampire story that starts off in the Old West and goes over to starts off in the Old West and eventually goes throughout time, I guess. So I started reading it, and as soon as Stephen King left the title with issue like number 8, I was already hooked, and I loved it. And I still continue to read American Vampire till this day, even though it's been on hiatus for the past like 7 months or so. Fantastic read. But once I heard Scott Snyder was going to be taking over Batman, I'm like, this is a writer that's going to be primed for superstar status. And as we all know, he is a superstar now, and it's well deserved. So, seeing that American Vampire is on hiatus, I've been looking for a Snyder Vertigo-esque type story, and I've heard very good things about this. I've been wanting to read it, but I want to read it from I've wanted to read it from the beginning. This has been on my Midtown want list for over a year. It's not an expensive book, but for some reason, it was a tough one for me to come by. One of my local comic book shops just bought a collection of mainly all modern stuff, and I went through it and snatched this up for a cover price minus 20%. So I was happy with that. Here's Green Arrow, number 1, from his miniseries from the 1980s. And this is the first time that Green Arrow had his own solo title. So kind of along the lines of the Zatanna special that I showed last week, as well as the Catwoman number 1 from her first miniseries. I always dig it when I can get a character's first foray into their own solo title. So, as a Green Arrow fan, had to pick it up. Not an expensive book, but cool nonetheless. Here is a rare occasion of me repurchasing a book that I owned in the 90s that wasn't worth anything in the 90s, and it still isn't worth anything now. Legion 91, number 31, and the cover says it all. It's Lobo versus Shazam. And it's a pretty good fight. It's one of those that doesn't end. It doesn't come to a definitive ending, as you know, a lot of these don't. But had to pick it up. I'm a big fan of these versus covers, and I was looking to fill something in on a Midtown order, and it was only like $2 or $3. So I dig it. Also from Midtown, World's Finest Comics, number 323. And this is the last issue. As many of you know, as I've repeated multiple times, I am a big fan of collecting these last issues from these long-running series that started out and they were up and running well before I ever came onto the scene. So this is another one of those examples. World's Finest started out in the Golden Age, ended off in 1986. So very cool to add that to my collection as a final issue fan and as well as a Batman fan. Continuing on with another last issue. Here's Thor number 502. This is the last issue of his first ongoing volume. And that artwork is so 90s. Look how long Thor's hair is. That is out of control. And hella, wow, Spawn wants his cape back, please. So I want to say that this issue, well, with issue 503, I went back to being titled Journey into Mystery. And but this was not a very good era for Marvel. This was right around the time of the Hero Reborn madness, and when Marvel, I guess, really started to started the tradition, I guess, of renumbering their titles. But at least back then they would let those books run up to like 60, 70 issues before they would renumber them with another number one issue. But I'm not going to get into the whole renumbering ramble right now. That's another ramble for another day. Wolverine number 55. This is the Greg Land EC Comics horror homage variant. And I wanted this just specifically for the cover. I own this entire story arc, which was originally advertised as the final Wolverine Sabretooth battle, but we all knew even back then that was just, bad false advertising. From what I remember from it, it does feature some outstanding Simone Bianchi artwork, which I don't see much of anymore, or if any. But Jeff Loeb, who I'm very hesitant to criticize because obviously as an artist he went through a dramatic change after his son's tragic death. But some of the dialogue in this comic is just, throughout the story arc is just atrocious. There's this one sequence in particular that is just scarred into my brain, where Sabretooth and Logan are about to crash a jet into the ground. And I'm not sure if I remember who said what to whom, but the dialogue went kind of like this. Quote, "I am so going to kill you." Response, quote, "As if." So I'm not making fun of anyone that actually does speak like that, but it was obviously Jeff Loeb's attempt to reach out to a very young audience of how a young teenager might speak in the early Argonauts, which is what, take that as you will, but as for characters, it is grossly out of character for characters like Logan and Creed to speak that way. So, but I am very happy to add this cover to my Wolverine collection. Speaking of killer covers, X Infernus #1 with just this totally heavy metal David Finch Magik cover. Fantastic. And this is another example of an X-Men miniseries that I had no idea about when it came out. I just wasn't paying attention. I think there was such a glut of X titles during this time, which had been going on for a long time, that I just kind of blocked out a lot of the X-Men spin-offs and miniseries because there were a glut of them. But this one was actually really good. Or, yeah, I'll give it a really good. So, X Furnace #1, #2, #3, #4, and for some reason, it came with, I bought this as a set. It came with a variant edition of #4 to go along with it. I picked this up from the same comic book shop that I picked up my set of the Messiah Complex. And this was 5 books for $8. So not bad. Even though I think the owner might have thought there was only 4 books in there, because he usually has them packaged with the first issue facing one way and the 4th issue facing the other. And I didn't know there were 5 comics in there either. But very cool, and a very, very cool Magik cover. A sharp contrast to the David Finch #1 cover. Continuing on the Magik bandwagon, the New Mutants Forever, #4 of 5 with an Arthur Adams cover. I've been seeing this comic pop up here and there on YouTube, and yet again, another example of a miniseries that did not pop up on my radar when it initially came out, but one that I would like to eventually collect. And then go off the X-Men oriented portion of the video with a non-X-Men title, The Amazing Spider-Man number 590 with a Wolverine appreciation cover. And as a Wolverine fan, how can I not love this comic? It has basically every iteration of Wolverine up until this comic was published. You have the then current Wolverine, the classic 1980s brown and tan Wolverine, which is my particular favorite. That's the version that I grew up reading. Weapon X Wolverine, the original debut Wolverine with the whiskers and all, Days of Future Past, and a nice little homage to Grant Morrison's Wolverine with a leather jacket just hanging on the chair. So very cool. What's cooler than a bunch of dogs playing cards? A bunch of Wolverines playing cards. So as a Wolverine fan, this one was on my radar for a while. Very happy to pick it up. I finally ended up getting around to picking up a copy of The Amazing Spider-Man number 265, which is the first appearance of Silver Sable. It's only a fine copy. It has one of my pet peeves, the infamous dog ear at the bottom, but I'm very happy to pick it up. I guess Silver Sable and Black Cat are supposed to have their own spin-off movie as well as Venom, and I guess they're trying to make a whole little spider universe for their movies, for their movie franchises. So we'll see how that goes. I would feel better about it if the spin-offs were also had some kind of connection to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they don't water down the franchise too badly, but we'll see. Everyone seems to be so obsessed with having their own universe and following the Marvel template, which I can dig. I love, movies that interconnect and having a universe, but you should concentrate on just, Spider-Man for now, I think. Even though they got someone great to play Venom. But we'll see. I also picked this up. Amazing Spider-Man number 265. This is the second print. There have been so many times that I passed up on the second print of Carnage. So, why not pick this one up? It was for $5. It's worth $5 to me, for my peace of mind. So so later on down the line, I won't be like, God, I could have picked that up for just $5. What was wrong with me? But with that said, I don't think it'll ever spike like the Carnage second print, just for the fact that I don't think Silver Sable will ever be as popular as a character as Carnage is. But who knows? I've been wrong many times before. From the same store, Amazing Spider-Man number 226, which has the second appearance of the Black Cat. Very happy to pick this up. Black Cat, Cloak and Dagger, Hobgoblin, and eventually Venom are just like from my golden age of collecting Spider-Man comics, from that era where I was a preteen to teenager. Great stuff. Great stuff that was going on back then. A little Bronze Age horror action. Supernatural thrillers featuring It, number 1. This was only $10. This is from that collection that I've been nibbling away at for several months now, and contains a Jim Steranko cover. So how could I turn that away? Giant-sized chillers, featuring the Curse of Dracula, and also featuring the first appearance of his daughter, Lilith. I love these giant-size comics from the 1970s. Just awesome stuff. Hard to collect in a good grade because of they're square bound. But as you can see right here, some sweet square bound action. Not totally perfect, but you have to be on the lookout for that all the time. For some reason, people on eBay, Amazon, wherever will list books as very fine, but just if they're square bound like this and they're from the 70s, just be very cautious and check out the square bound, because spine splits, chunks, blowouts, all things to look out for when buying these books. I'm a big fan of the Tomb of Dracula franchise from the 1970s, and this was a book that I had to go to eBay to pick up because I have never run into this one in the wild. So very happy to add this into my Tomb of Dracula collection, which will never be complete unless I find a very cheap copy of the first appearance of Blade, like all of those books are within reach, except for the first issue and the first appearance of Blade. Those are kind of expensive, but great series to collect. Just not a very cheap series to collect unless you can find them at a deal. So cool stuff. As a Batman fan, I was very happy to pick this up. This is Justice #2, the second print Alex Ross Batman cover, and this is probably, well, I own this entire miniseries, or maxi series, I guess, and this was just fantastic. It was probably one of my, if not one of my favorites, my favorite Justice League story of all time. It was just like DC went up to Alex Ross and the creators and said, "Here, guys, just tell us if you could tell us one Ultimate Justice League story, and just throw in the kitchen sink, what would it be like?" And I think it would come out something like this. I'm not saying that that's what actually happened, but it sure seems that way. This is just like the most epic Justice League story of all time. Now, I think this book goes for anywhere between $15 and $25. There was no way in hell I'd pay that. I paid $3 for this. This is one of those deals that, while I love the second print variants, there's no way I'm going to pay a premium for them. I guess #4 is the one that, is in the most demand, the second print Shazam cover. But as a Batman fan, Batman and Wolverine are essentially my two favorite characters. So this was the one that, out of all of them, I actually wanted the most. And to be able to pick it up for $3, very cool. And to finish it off, finally, the pick of the week. The Incredible Hulk #102, premiere issue. This is the poor man's version of having a Hulk #1. I'll never have the real Hulk #1, but this is the Hulk comic that I grew up reading. I'm not sure if it took over Tales to Astonish or Tales of Suspense. I can't remember, but this was during the Marvel expansion period during the 1960s, where they came out with where they just started expanding their line with other examples of like Hulk 102, Captain Marvel #1, Submariner #1, Iron Man #1, Captain America #100. When I forget the issue, but the issue of Strange Tales where Doctor Strange took over the title finally, and Thor #126. So and let's see, Shield #1. So I think that names them all. I might be forgetting, but this was all occurring before I was born. So I've been kind of obsessing with this whole premiere expansion series era at Marvel. So I ended up finding this on eBay of all places. Like at one of my comic shops, they have this in not as good condition for $200. So this book will, bring in a premium price most of the time. But I ended up finding this on eBay last week with a starting bid of $75. So I put in a bid, and I put in a high bid for $85, and I ended up paying $85 for the premiere issue of Hulk, Incredible Hulk 102, the series of Hulk that I grew up reading. So, like a couple of months ago, I ended up picking up the last issue. Now I have the first issue, which is fantastic, man. Geeked out. I've also picked up a couple of other issues from the premiere era, I guess, that you'll be seeing in upcoming videos. So, yeah, very stoked to pick this up. So that's all I have for this week. I will be back next week with another comic book haul. I want to wish all the fathers out there, if you are a father, happy Father's Day. And thank you all for liking, commenting, and most importantly, let me just emphasize, thank you for watching. For some reason or another, I have had a massive decline in viewership for reasons, I don't know. Either I'm not beefing with anyone. I don't have any feuds. I barely interact. So maybe I'm just boring and old. I don't know. But for those of you that do take the time and still come by here to watch some geeky comic book videos, I thank you. So I will be back next week. Until then, take care. See ya.